I was just a high school teacher in this small southern town, minding my own business, when things took a dark turn. It all started innocently enough, with a new student, Emily, joining my class. She was quiet, kept to herself, and didn't stand out much. But soon, I noticed her demeanor changing, like she was constantly on edge. One day, after school, Emily hesitated before leaving my class. She looked scared, like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. I asked if everything was okay, and that's when she reluctantly spilled the beans. A man had been following her, showing up wherever she went, and she was terrified. I tried to calm her down, assuring her we'd figure things out. That night, I decided to do some investigating. I couldn't let a student live in fear. I checked the school records and found out the man who had been stalking Emily had just moved to town. His name was John, and he had no apparent reason to be obsessed with a high school girl. The next day, I kept an eye on Emily. It wasn't long before I spotted John lurking near the school. He wasn't a student or a parent. He had no business being there. My protective instincts kicked in, and I confronted him. John denied everything, claiming he was new in town and just taking a walk. But there was something about his demeanor that set off alarm bells. I warned him to stay away from Emily, but the sinister glint in his eyes told me this wouldn't be the end of it. I reported the incident to the school and the local authorities, hoping they'd keep a close watch. Days passed, and Emily's fear didn't subside. If anything, it intensified. She told me about strange messages she received, ominous notes left in her locker. It was like this guy was toying with her, enjoying the terror he was causing. I couldn't sit back and watch this unfold. I decided to keep a close eye on both Emily and John, a self-appointed guardian. The tension in the air was palpable. Emily was constantly on edge, and John seemed to revel in the psychological game he was playing. One evening, as Emily was leaving the school, I noticed John trailing her. I confronted him again, this time more forcefully. He tried to brush it off, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was dangerous. I reported the incident to the police, but without concrete evidence, they could only issue a warning. As the weeks passed, the stalking escalated. Emily was getting threatening messages, and I started receiving anonymous calls, eerie whispers on the other end. It was like this guy was mocking me, letting me know he was always one step ahead. One night, as I was leaving school, I spotted John in the shadows. He didn't try to hide this time, he just stood there, a sinister grin on his face. I rushed towards him, anger boiling over, but he disappeared into the darkness. It was a game, and I was losing. I doubled down on my efforts to protect Emily. I urged her to stay vigilant, avoid being alone, and report anything unusual. The police were involved, but their hands were tied without concrete evidence of a crime. One day, Emily disappeared. She didn't show up for school, and her parents reported her missing. Panic set in. I couldn't shake the guilt, wondering if there was more I could have done. The town was in uproar, and the police launched a search. Days later, they found her. Emily was alive, but her spirit was broken. John had abducted her, subjected her to unspeakable horrors. The town was in shock, grappling with the realization that such darkness could exist within its borders. John was arrested, and Emily tried to piece her life back together, but the scars ran deep. The incident shook the entire community, a stark reminder that evil could manifest in the most unexpected places. I moved to this quiet Midwest town for a fresh start. It was one of those places where everyone knew everyone else, a tight-knit community with a friendly vibe. My new house had a picket fence and a well-kept garden, a far cry from the hustle of city life. The neighbors welcomed me with warm smiles, and I settled in, thinking I'd found the perfect haven. That is until the new neighbor moved in next door. There was something off about him from the start. He kept to himself, never engaging in the casual small talk that was common in the neighborhood. As weeks passed, my unease grew. I noticed strange activities at his house, late-night gatherings, peculiar noises. Curiosity got the better of me, and one night, I peeked through the curtains. What I saw chilled me to the bone. The neighbor was conducting some sort of bizarre ritual in his backyard, surrounded by hooded figures. Fear gripped me, and I debated whether to involve the authorities. But the thought of being labeled paranoid held me back. I decided to investigate discreetly, convincing myself it was all just a misunderstanding. I started keeping tabs on his comings and goings, taking notes on any suspicious behavior. My anxiety reached a breaking point when I discovered that several neighborhood pets had gone missing. A pit formed in my stomach as I connected the dots, the strange rituals, the missing animals. One evening, as I peered through the window, I caught him dragging a bag into his backyard. My heart raced as I watched him dig a hole in the ground. Panic set in, and I realized I needed proof before involving the police. I grabbed my phone and discreetly recorded the ominous scene. The next day, I gathered the courage to share my findings with the authorities. They were skeptical at first, but the video and my notes piqued their interest. They promised to look into it discreetly. Days passed, and the atmosphere in the neighborhood grew tense. The neighbor's behavior became increasingly erratic, and I felt the weight of his suspicion on me. I kept my head down, fearing for my safety, but the unease lingered. Late one night, I heard a knock on my door. It was the police, and their grim expression sent shivers down my spine. They had uncovered a horrifying truth. The neighbor was involved in a twisted cult, and they had evidence of unspeakable crimes committed in the town. The cult had been operating in the shadows, preying on the unsuspecting community. The police were launching a full-scale investigation, and my neighbor was now the prime suspect. I felt a mix of relief and terror, knowing that I had unintentionally stumbled upon a dark secret that threatened the entire town. As news spread, the town was plunged into shock. The neighbor's house became a crime scene, and the cult's activities were exposed. The community, once so tightly knit, was now grappling with betrayal and fear. It was a wake-up call that danger could lurk even in the most seemingly idyllic places. The incident left scars on the town, a collective trauma that would forever alter its peaceful facade. I was a journalist, covering the beat in a small Pacific Northwest town. Life was calm until a string of disappearances shook the community. People were vanishing without a trace, leaving behind a lingering fear that cast a shadow over the town. Curiosity drove me to dig deeper. I pored over police reports, interviewed families, and scoured the town for any leads. It became clear that the disappearances were more than random incidents. There was a pattern, a connection that nobody wanted to acknowledge. The mayor, a charismatic figure loved by the town, always seemed one step ahead of my investigation. Every time I got close to a breakthrough, the door slammed shut. The locals were tight-lipped, and a sense of unease lingered in the air. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Late one night, as I sifted through old newspaper clippings in the archives, I stumbled upon a pattern. The disappearances coincided with the mayor's rise to power. It wasn't a coincidence, it was a chilling correlation that sent shivers down my spine. I decided to confront the mayor, hoping to get answers. I cornered him at a town hall meeting, asking about the missing persons. He feigned ignorance, denying any involvement. But there was a coldness in his eyes, a calculated distance that made my skin crawl. Undeterred, I reached out to the families of the missing. They shared stories of their loved ones, desperate for closure. As I delved deeper, a narrative emerged. The mayor's office was involved in a cover-up, silencing anyone who dared to question the official version of events. I started receiving anonymous threats, warning me to back off. But fear fueled my determination. I couldn't let the mayor continue his sinister agenda. The town's tranquility was a facade, and I was determined to expose the truth. Late one night, I received a mysterious call. A voice, distorted and filled with menace, told me to meet at a secluded spot near the woods. Against my better judgment, I went, armed with a recorder and a sense of dread. The meeting was surreal, the shadows playing tricks on my imagination. In the darkness, a figure emerged, the mayor. He revealed the extent of his control, admitting to orchestrating the disappearances to maintain order. He spoke of sacrifice for the greater good, his words sending a chill down my spine. The town's serenity was a facade built on the suffering of the innocent. Panicked, I fled, racing back to my apartment. The mayor's threats echoed in my mind, and I realized the danger I was in. I had stumbled upon a dark secret, and the powerful were determined to keep it hidden. As I compiled my evidence, the mayor's influence loomed over me. I received warnings, intimidation tactics that tested my resolve. The town, once a haven, had become a trap, and the walls closed in. I contacted a fellow journalist from a nearby city, sharing my findings. I needed someone to expose the truth if something happened to me. The fear of retribution intensified as I saw the shadows outside my window, unsure if they were figments of my imagination or real threats. The story broke, the truth revealed to the world. The mayor's empire crumbled, and the town was left to grapple with the aftermath. The disappearances were no longer a secret, and the once tranquil community was thrust into chaos. I was just a regular doctor in a quiet New England town, dealing with the usual cases that came through the clinic. But something started to feel off. More and more patients were showing up with mysterious symptoms I couldn't quite diagnose. It was like a strange epidemic that had crept into our community. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, a cluster of unrelated cases. But as the weeks passed, the number of patients exhibiting these bizarre symptoms kept growing. It was unsettling, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something deeper at play. Late one night, I decided to review the medical records of these patients, hoping to find a common thread. That's when I stumbled upon a pattern. They had all participated in a clinical trial run by a pharmaceutical company. The trial was supposed to be for a routine medication, but the symptoms these patients were experiencing were far from ordinary. Curiosity and concern fueled my determination to get to the bottom of this. I reached out to some of the patients, trying to piece together their experiences. They spoke of the trial with fear in their eyes, describing procedures that went beyond what they had consented to. As I delved deeper, I uncovered a horrifying truth. The pharmaceutical company was conducting a secret medical experiment. They had been testing a new drug on unsuspecting participants, pushing the boundaries of ethical research. The symptoms were side effects, and they were growing increasingly severe. I couldn't stay silent. I knew the potential repercussions of exposing this scandal, but the safety of my patients came first. I compiled the evidence, gathering testimonies from the affected individuals and documenting the details of the clinical trial. The pharmaceutical company had influential ties in the town, making it a dangerous adversary. As I began to leak the information to the media, I noticed strange occurrences, my office being searched, anonymous threats, and the feeling that I was constantly being watched. One evening, as I left the clinic, I heard footsteps behind me. I quickened my pace, glancing over my shoulder. A shadowy figure trailed me, and the chill down my spine intensified. I took a detour through dimly lit streets, trying to lose them, but the footsteps persisted. I reached my car, heart pounding, and locked the doors. The figure lingered in the shadows, just out of sight. Fear gnawed at me, and I drove home with an unsettling certainty that I had become a target. The next morning, the news broke. The pharmaceutical company's dark secret was exposed, and the town was thrown into chaos. The affected patients became the face of a scandal that rocked not only the local community but also the medical industry. The fallout was immense. Legal actions were taken against the company, and the town grappled with the aftermath. My role in exposing the truth had put me in the spotlight, making me a target for those who wanted to keep the experiment hidden. I received threatening messages, my car vandalized, and strange figures lurking outside my home. Paranoia consumed me, and I couldn't escape the feeling that danger was always around the corner. The trial was investigated, and the medical community was forced to reevaluate its ethical standards. The town, once peaceful, was forever changed. The shadows cast by the pharmaceutical company's actions lingered, a stark reminder that the pursuit of scientific progress could come at a chilling cost. So, we moved to this small, quiet town in the southwest. Figured it'd be a fresh start for us. One day, we strolled down the main street, and there it was, a dusty old antique store. Looked like something out of a movie, with creaky wooden floors and shelves full of forgotten treasures. A sign in the window caught our eye, help wanted. My wife, always eager to find work, decided to give it a shot. The owner, Mr. Jennings, was an older guy with a perpetual scowl. He eyed her up and down, sizing her up like she was some commodity. But hey, a job was a job. First day on the job, my wife found herself surrounded by peculiar items. Old watches, faded paintings, and trinkets that carried the weight of time. The air in that store felt heavy, like each piece held a story, not all of them pleasant. As days passed, my wife started noticing strange things. Items seemed to come and go mysteriously, like they had a life of their own. She brushed it off at first, thinking maybe it was just the nature of an antique store. But then came the late nights. Mr. Jennings would have her stay behind, cataloging items in the dimly lit back room. The air felt colder there, and the shadows danced around her, whispering secrets that she couldn't quite make out. She started feeling uneasy, like she was caught in something she couldn't understand. Curiosity got the better of her. One night, she decided to dig a little deeper. She started snooping around, looking into Mr. Jennings' records. That's when she stumbled upon the truth, a dark truth. The antiques weren't just old, they were stolen. The store was a front for a much shadier operation. Terrified, she confronted Mr. Jennings. The air in that back room grew dense with tension. He didn't deny it, just looked at her with those cold eyes. It was as if the walls themselves were closing in on her. She demanded answers, asked him why he was dealing in stolen goods. Mr. Jennings chuckled, a sinister sound that sent shivers down her spine. He reveled in it, boasting about how easy it was to hide in plain sight behind the facade of an antique store. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. The room felt darker, and the antiques seemed to come alive with malevolence. Mr. Jennings' smile turned into a twisted grin. He warned her not to interfere, telling her it was too late. The shadows, once mere observers, now felt like accomplices in some sinister game. My wife, fear etched on her face, knew she had to get out. She stumbled backward, making her way towards the door. But Mr. Jennings wasn't about to let her leave with her newfound knowledge. As she reached for the doorknob, he lunged at her, grabbing her arm with a grip that felt inhuman. Panic set in as she struggled to break free. The room seemed to warp around her, the walls closing in, and the shadows reaching out like malevolent tendrils. In a desperate move, she managed to break away, tearing open the door and fleeing into the night. The echoes of Mr. Jennings' laughter followed her, a haunting soundtrack to the chilling encounter she had just survived. We left that town in a hurry, the weight of its secrets too much for us to bear. I was knee-deep in research, trying to unravel the history of this quiet Appalachian town. It started innocently enough, just me, dusty old books, and the scent of aged paper in the local archives. My goal was to understand the roots of this place, the stories buried beneath the surface. As I delved into the town's past, I stumbled upon a series of gruesome murders that sent chills down my spine. The connection between the present and the past was too eerie to be mere coincidence. I couldn't ignore the feeling that I was unearthing something dark, something that the town desperately wanted to keep hidden. Late nights turned into early mornings as I sifted through historical records, newspaper clippings, and faded photographs. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that these murders weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a pattern, a recurring nightmare that the town had tried to forget. The whispers around town became louder. Locals avoided eye contact when I asked questions, as if the mere mention of the past sent shivers down their spines. The town seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to be uncovered that should have stayed buried. The murders, separated by decades, mirrored each other uncannily. Patterns emerged, pointing to a sinister thread that bound the past to the present. I couldn't shake the feeling that something malevolent was woven into the very fabric of this town. One evening, as I was piecing together the puzzle, I received an anonymous letter. No return address, just a warning to stop digging. The words were hastily scrawled, the ink bleeding onto the paper. Fear knotted my stomach, but curiosity fueled my determination. I visited the crime scenes, walked the same streets as the victims. The town, once picturesque, took on a haunting aura. Shadows seemed to linger longer, and the air carried a weight that pressed down on my chest. I couldn't escape the feeling that someone was watching, someone who didn't want the truth to surface. I started interviewing the older residents, hoping to glean first-hand accounts of the events that unfolded in the past. It wasn't easy. They spoke in hushed tones, their eyes flickering with a mix of fear and reluctance. But one elderly woman, her face etched with years of wisdom and sorrow, decided to share her story. She spoke of a dark time, a time when the town was gripped by fear. The murders, back then, mirrored the ones happening now. A killer among them, hidden in plain sight, preying on the community. The town, desperate for a resolution, resorted to a cover-up. They buried the truth, hoping that by erasing the past, they could escape the darkness that clung to their history. The more I uncovered, the more my research became a personal obsession. The town's secrets seemed to infect me, whispering in the quiet moments, urging me to keep digging. Paranoia set in. I felt eyes on me, shadows lurking in corners, a constant sense of being followed. One night, as I pored over my notes, a knock echoed through my empty apartment. I opened the door to find no one there, just a cold breeze that sent a shiver down my spine. The anonymous letters increased, their messages growing more explicit, warning me to leave the past buried. But I couldn't stop. The truth was within reach, and I needed to expose the darkness that haunted this town. The more I pushed, the more the town pushed back. I became an outsider, a threat to their carefully constructed facade. The final revelation came during a visit to the old cemetery. Weathered tombstones told stories of lives cut short, of secrets taken to the grave. In the midst of the eeriness, I found a hidden passage beneath a gnarled tree, leading to a forgotten section. There, buried among overgrown weeds, were unmarked graves, the resting places of those deemed too dangerous to be remembered. The connection between the past and the present became chillingly clear. The killer, once hidden, had resurfaced, continuing a legacy that the town had desperately tried to erase. As I stumbled upon this macabre revelation, the air grew colder, and a presence seemed to materialize. I could feel eyes on me, unseen but undeniably there. Panic set in as I realized I had become entangled in a web of darkness that extended beyond the pages of history. The town, it seemed, was alive with the echoes of its past. As I confronted the truth, a figure emerged from the shadows, a living embodiment of the town's malevolence. The killer, driven by a twisted sense of duty, stood before me. Their eyes bore into mine, a chilling acknowledgement of the unspoken pact that bound us to the town's secrets. I fled, the weight of the town's history clinging to me like a curse. I left the Appalachian town, but the shadows followed. The stories of the past, the murders that echoed through time, became the haunting melody that played in the recesses of my mind. I was working the night shift at this gas station in the deep south, just a regular guy making ends meet. The town was small, and life was usually slow-paced, but that night, everything changed. It started with this old man who came in, looking jittery and out of sorts. He muttered something about strange happenings on the outskirts of town, a secret he'd been keeping for years. His eyes darted around, and I could tell he was scared. Later, a group of locals gathered at the gas pumps, whispering about the old man's ramblings. They spoke of a dark history, something the town had tried to bury for decades. My curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to dig a little deeper. The old man's story led me to a forgotten cemetery on the outskirts of town. The air there felt thick, charged with an eerie energy. As I wandered among the tombstones, I stumbled upon a grave with no name, just a date etched into the weathered stone. It sent shivers down my spine. The locals, tight-lipped as ever, wouldn't spill the details. But that night, strange things started happening at the gas station. The lights flickered, and the air grew heavy. It felt like the whole town was holding its breath, waiting for something to surface. Then came the mysterious phone calls. Static-filled voices on the line, speaking in hushed tones about secrets buried in the town's history. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone sent a chill down my spine. It was like the past was reaching out, trying to drag me into its tangled web. One night, a stranger walked in, a man with a haunted look, like he'd seen too much. He claimed to be a journalist, investigating the town's dark past. We shared stories, comparing notes on the unsettling events that had unfolded. The gas station became a hub of nervous energy, a gathering place for those seeking answers. The journalist and I, drawn into this twisted narrative, decided to uncover the truth. The town, it seemed, was plagued by a sinister plot that had festered for generations. We ventured into the outskirts, where the old man had hinted at something unspeakable. The air grew colder as we stumbled upon an abandoned house, its windows shattered and doors ajar. It felt like a portal to the past, a place that time had forgotten. In the darkness, we uncovered evidence of a ritualistic cult that had operated in the shadows for decades. Symbols etched on the walls, remnants of twisted ceremonies, and photographs of hooded figures. It was a horror story playing out in faded Polaroids. The journalist, undeterred by the mounting darkness, insisted on exposing the truth. We uncovered a series of unsolved disappearances, the victims connected by a thread of ritualistic sacrifice. The town, it seemed, had been complicit in burying the crimes to maintain a facade of normalcy. As we dug deeper, the town turned against us. The whispers grew louder, the shadows longer. The gas station, once a sanctuary, became a place of fear. The journalist received threatening messages, warnings to back off, but he pressed on, relentless in his pursuit of the truth. One night, as we delved into the heart of the cult's activities, we stumbled upon a gathering in the woods. Hooded figures surrounded an altar, chanting in a language that sent shivers down our spines. The journalist, capturing it all on camera, exposed the cult's malevolent rituals to the world. But the town, unwilling to confront its dark past, fought back. We became pariahs, marked by the shadows that clung to our every step. The gas station, once a refuge, became a battleground between the truth and the town's desperate attempts to bury it. The final confrontation came in the dead of night. Hooded figures surrounded us, their faces hidden in the darkness. It felt like a nightmare, the air thick with tension, the gas station lights flickering ominously. The journalist and I, outnumbered and exposed, faced the town's wrath. A sinister calm settled over the gas station as the figures closed in. The journalist, defiant to the end, continued to document the unfolding horror. The shadows, once mere whispers, became a tangible force, enveloping us in darkness. And then, it was over. The gas station, now a silent witness to the town's secrets, stood eerily still. The journalist, the one who sought the truth, was gone, swallowed by the shadows. I was left alone, haunted by the events that had unfolded. The town, seemingly untouched by the revelation, returned to its facade of normalcy. The gas station, a witness to the darkness within, remained a silent sentinel. So, there I was, back in my small Midwest hometown after years away. Everything seemed the same, but underneath that veneer of normalcy, something was off. My gut told me there was trouble, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had walked right into it. The town sheriff, a man I once trusted, had this look in his eyes, something dark, like he was hiding more than just the usual secrets. It started with a chance encounter at the local diner. He shot me a sideways glance, and that's when I knew something was wrong, something beyond the scope of a routine hometown reunion. Late one night, as I was wandering down Main Street, I overheard hushed conversations. The sheriff's name kept popping up, tied to illegal activities that sent shivers down my spine. This wasn't the town I remembered. It had become a breeding ground for corruption. I decided to dig a little deeper, just to satisfy my growing paranoia. Late-night visits to the sheriff's office, snooping around records. I felt like a detective in some cheesy crime movie. But what I uncovered wasn't fiction. It was a tangled web of criminal enterprise, with the sheriff at the center. The criminal activities ranged from drug trafficking to money laundering. The sheriff, once the symbol of law and order, had become a puppet master pulling the strings behind closed doors. It was like the town was under his control, and he had no qualms about using fear to maintain it. I debated whether to expose the truth, but fear gripped me. The sheriff, he wasn't just a lawman gone rogue, he was the embodiment of the danger that lurked in the shadows of my once idyllic hometown. One evening, as I was leaving the diner, I felt a pair of eyes on me. Glancing around, I locked eyes with the sheriff. His stare sent chills down my spine, a silent warning that I couldn't ignore. It was like he knew I had seen through his facade, and he didn't like it one bit. Paranoia set in. Every car that slowed down felt like a potential threat. Every glance from a passerby felt like a test. It was as if the entire town had become a trap, and the sheriff was the puppeteer, orchestrating the dance of danger around me. The turning point came when I received an anonymous note, just a few words scrawled on a piece of paper, warning me to leave town before it was too late. The fear became tangible, and the weight of the sheriff's influence hung over me like a dark cloud. I decided to confront him, to demand answers. As I entered the sheriff's office, the air grew thick with tension. His gaze, cold and calculating, met mine. The room felt like a pressure cooker about to burst. I confronted him about the criminal empire he had built, about the fear he had instilled in the town. He denied everything, but there was a gleam in his eyes that told a different story. The sheriff, once a figure of authority, had become a wolf in sheep's clothing. As I left the office, I felt eyes on me again. This time, though, it wasn't just paranoia. It was real. A group of shadowy figures emerged from the darkness, closing in on me. The sheriff had unleashed his enforcers, and I was caught in the crossfire. I ran, breathless and panicked, through the empty streets. Every alley felt like a dead end, every corner a potential trap. The sounds of pursuit echoed in my ears, and the town that once felt familiar became a maze of danger. The shadows closed in, and just when I thought I was cornered, a figure emerged from the darkness, a fellow townsperson who had seen through the sheriff's reign of terror. Together, we navigated the labyrinth of back streets, evading the sheriff's enforcers. We reached the outskirts of town, gasping for breath. The adrenaline-fueled escape had revealed the extent of the sheriff's power and the danger that lurked in the heart of the Midwest town. I realized that my once safe haven had transformed into a nightmare, and I had to escape before the sheriff's reach extended any further. Leaving the town was bittersweet. It was a place I had once called home, now tainted by corruption and danger. So, there's this town, right? A place where everyone knows each other's business, or at least they think they do. It's the kind of small town where life seems predictable, and nothing ever happens. Until it does. I'm just a regular guy, working a dead-end job at the local hardware store. Nothing fancy. One day, a stranger walks in, not unusual for a small town, except this guy had this air of mystery about him. Something didn't quite fit. He asked about the town's history, its people, and I, being the friendly local, tried to help out. But the questions he asked, they weren't typical small talk. He wanted to know about old scandals, family feuds, and the kind of secrets folks keep buried. As days went by, things got weirder. I noticed him hanging around the town archives, digging through old newspapers, and talking to the elderly residents. The air in town changed, a sense of discomfort settling in, like we were all being scrutinized under a magnifying glass. Then came the whispers, rumors about the stranger compiling a dossier on every resident. A list of sins, mistakes, and regrets that were best left forgotten. The town, once tight-knit, started unraveling. Paranoia took root, and everyone began suspecting their neighbors of betraying the unspoken trust that held us together. I decided to confront the stranger, ask him what he was up to. He met me with a smile, calm and collected, and explained that he was a journalist working on a story about the real heart of small-town life. But his eyes told a different story, a story that sent a chill down my spine. As the stranger's investigation continued, the town turned into a pressure cooker. Old wounds resurfaced, and accusations flew. Families that had been friends for generations found themselves at odds, torn apart by the stranger's unsettling presence. One night, as I walked home, I realized I was being followed. Every step echoed in the deserted streets, and I could feel eyes on the back of my neck. The stranger, or someone working for him, was monitoring my every move. Fear sank in, a fear that the small-town safety I had taken for granted was slipping away. I decided to dig into the stranger's background, turn the tables, and expose his motives. The more I investigated, the more I unraveled a sinister truth. He wasn't a journalist. He was a private investigator hired by someone with a vendetta against the town. The stranger's client, a disgruntled former resident with an axe to grind, sought revenge for perceived wrongs. The dossier he compiled wasn't for a story. It was a weapon, a way to destroy the lives of those he felt had wronged him. Armed with this revelation, I confronted the stranger. He didn't deny it, just smirked, admitting he was a hired gun. The town, it seemed, was a pawn in a twisted game of revenge played by someone with a grudge. The situation escalated. The stranger's client, unsatisfied with the chaos he'd caused, sent threats demanding payment for his services. The town, now fractured and paranoid, faced an even greater danger: extortion from within. Together with a few others who saw through the stranger's charade, we decided to stand up to the client. We exposed his plan, revealing the web of lies and deceit that had torn our community apart. The truth, once unveiled, acted as a bomb, bringing the town back from the brink of destruction. The stranger, abandoned by his client, disappeared as quietly as he'd arrived. The town, scarred but resilient, began the slow process of rebuilding trust. We learned the hard way that sometimes the real horror lies not in the supernatural, but in the darkness that can lurk within the human heart. Life in the small town continued, its residents forever changed by the stranger's unwelcome visit. The lesson was clear: secrets, grudges, and vendettas, when unearthed, can become a force more destructive than any ghost or supernatural entity. So, there's this old family home in a quiet New England town, a place filled with memories, or so I thought. We decided to gather the whole clan for a reunion, to reconnect with our roots. Little did I know, roots can run deep and reveal some twisted truths. The family home, a creaky old thing with a history as murky as the nearby lake, hadn't seen us all together in years. Nostalgia was in the air as we entered, laughter mingling with echoes of our childhood. But that warmth didn't last long. As we settled in, exploring the familiar rooms and sharing tales of yesteryear, someone stumbled upon a hidden compartment in the attic. It was like a secret passage, dusty and forgotten. The air in that space felt different, heavy, laden with the weight of untold stories. We found an old box, filled with letters tied in brittle ribbons and faded photographs. Curiosity got the better of us, and we started unraveling the family's secret buried in that dusty box. Turns out, our ancestors weren't the saints we thought they were. The letters spoke of a dark past, a history stained with betrayal and scandal. Skeletons, it seemed, had been locked away in that hidden compartment, concealed from the family's collective memory. As we pieced together the puzzle, tensions rose, and the familial bonds that once felt unbreakable began to strain. The revelations weren't just shocking, they were devastating. Turns out, one of our own had committed a heinous crime, a secret that had been carefully hidden to protect the family name. The weight of that truth, like a crushing force, tore through the fabric of our reunion. Arguments erupted, accusations flew, and the ancestral home became a battleground for the skeletons we uncovered. The quaint New England town, with its picturesque charm, now held the echoes of a family torn apart by the sins of its past. The family members took sides, alliances shifting like sand. Whispers of resentment filled the air, and the laughter that once echoed through the halls turned into strained silence. It was as if the revelation had unleashed a dormant darkness that festered within our bloodline. The matriarch, the glue that held us together, became a broken figure, burdened by the weight of the long-buried secret. The shame that engulfed the family was palpable, like a stain that couldn't be washed away. Each family member carried the weight of the past, and the ancestral home, once a symbol of unity, now stood as a testament to our fractured history. Attempts to reconcile were futile. The family, once a close-knit clan, disintegrated into factions fueled by resentment and betrayal. The New England town, with its picturesque charm, now witnessed the unraveling of a family's legacy. The reunion, meant to strengthen our bonds, became a painful reminder of the fragility of family ties. As we left the ancestral home, the air was heavy with a sense of loss, and the once close relationships were now strained, forever marked by the revelation that tore us apart. The family's secret, long buried in the attic's hidden compartment, had a way of seeping into every corner of our lives. The New England town, unchanged by our turmoil, watched as we scattered, carrying the weight of our shared history and shattered relationships. The reunion, meant to be a celebration of family, became a haunting tale of betrayal and shattered illusions. The ancestral home, with its hidden compartments and untold stories, stood as a silent witness to the disintegration of a once proud lineage. Okay, so I'm just this regular guy, hosting a radio show in a small town on the Great Plains. Nothing special, just spinning some tunes, chatting about the weather, you know, the usual. But things got weird real quick. One night, during my show, I started receiving these cryptic messages over the airwaves. At first, I thought it was some technical glitch or interference. But the messages, they were unnerving, whispers and distorted voices that didn't sound human. I brushed it off, thinking maybe it was just a prank or some weird atmospheric conditions. As the days went on, the messages got more specific, like they were targeting me. They mentioned things only I would know, personal stuff. It sent shivers down my spine, but I played it cool on air, pretending it was all a joke. But deep down, I was freaked out. Then, the messages took a dark turn. They started hinting at things going on in the town, things I never knew. Secrets that had been buried deep beneath the surface. It felt like the town itself was whispering its darkest confessions, and I was the unwilling recipient. I started digging, asking around, trying to make sense of the cryptic revelations. Turns out, the town had a dark underbelly, a history of corruption, cover-ups, and crimes that nobody talked about. The messages, it seemed, were pulling back the curtain on the town's dirty laundry. As I delved deeper, the town's residents got edgy. They avoided eye contact, spoke in hushed tones, like they knew I was onto something. The more I pressed, the more resistance I faced. It was like the town had a collective secret, and they were hell-bent on keeping it buried. One night, as I was broadcasting, the messages escalated. They started naming names, exposing individuals involved in the town's illicit activities. It was like the radio waves had become a weapon, tearing apart the town's facade of normalcy. Panic set in, and I could feel the tension escalating with each passing minute. I received a letter, no return address, just a bunch of newspaper clippings detailing unsolved crimes and corruption in the town. The letter hinted that my investigation was putting me in danger, that some people didn't appreciate the truth coming to light. It was a chilling warning that sent me into overdrive. The next broadcast, I spilled everything on air, the names, the crimes, the corruption. It was a Hail Mary, hoping that exposing the truth would somehow protect me. But the town, it turned on me. Phone calls flooded in, threats in the dark, warning me to back off. The cryptic messages on air changed too. They became more menacing, like they were taunting me, letting me know that I was in over my head. I couldn't sleep, paranoia gnawing at me every time I walked down the street. The town had become a trap, and I was caught in its web of lies and deceit. One night, after the broadcast, I was walking home when I felt a presence behind me. I quickened my pace, heart pounding in my chest. The footsteps grew louder, and before I knew it, someone grabbed me from behind, covering my mouth. I struggled, but a voice whispered in my ear, "Keep quiet if you want to live." They dragged me into an alley, face pressed against the cold brick wall. The dim light revealed a group of shadowy figures, their faces hidden in the darkness. They warned me to stop digging, to leave the town and never come back. It wasn't a request, it was a threat. I left town, like they wanted. Packed my bags, left the radio gate behind, and never looked back. The messages on air had stopped, but the town's dark secrets haunted me. The Great Plains, once a vast expanse of open sky, felt suffocating. I carried the weight of what I had uncovered, a burden that would stay with me forever. The small town on the Great Plains, with its friendly facade, had shown me its true face. The cryptic messages, the threats, the dark revelations, it was a wake-up call that some secrets are better left buried. The radio waves, once my medium for connecting with the town, had become a conduit for something far more sinister. As I drove away from the town, the radio tower disappearing in the rearview mirror, I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows of that place would linger forever. We were just this regular couple, living in a coastal community, and we thought it'd be a great idea to organize a town fair. You know, bring the community together, have some good times. Little did we know, it would turn into a nightmare. As we were planning the fair, we stumbled upon some old records at the town hall. The kind of stuff no one really bothered with, faded photos, newspaper clippings, you name it. We found this pattern. Every time the town had a fair or festival, there were these unsettling events that followed. First, it was a fire that destroyed part of the boardwalk. Then, a mysterious illness that spread among the locals. We couldn't believe our eyes. It was like the fair brought a curse along with it, a dark history that repeated itself. But we brushed it off, you know? Thought it was just coincidence, the stuff of urban legends. As we set up the fairground, things got weirder. The attractions we had planned started mirroring the events from the old records, a fire breather, a fortune teller, each act inadvertently linked to the town's troubled past. People started acting strange too. The locals, who were usually friendly, seemed on edge. Whispers circulated about the fair being cursed, and we laughed it off, thinking it was just small-town superstition. As the fair kicked off, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't the usual joy and laughter. It was tense, like an invisible storm brewing. The fire breather's act felt uncomfortably close to the historic fire, and the fortune teller's tent seemed to exude an eerie energy. Then, the first unsettling event unfolded. A local historian, known for his stories about the town's past, collapsed near the fortune teller's tent. He was muttering something about a curse, his eyes wild with terror. The paramedics rushed him away, and we tried to maintain order, but the unease lingered. The next day, as we prepared for the second night of the fair, a storm rolled in, unexpected and fierce. The same thing had happened in the past, a storm hitting during a town event. Panic set in, and people started leaving the fairgrounds, fearing a repeat of the disasters from history. It felt like we were trapped in a nightmare. The fair, meant to unite the community, had become a stage for the town's dark past to replay itself. We tried to cancel the remaining events, but the damage was done. The fair had stirred something, a force that refused to be ignored. As we packed up, we noticed a strange pattern in the fair attractions. Each one seemed to represent a different historical event, a twisted reenactment orchestrated by some unseen force. It wasn't a coincidence, it was a chilling revelation that the town's history was a cycle of tragedies, and the fair was a catalyst. People avoided us, as if we were to blame for the unsettling events. The whispers turned into accusations, and the fair, once a symbol of community spirit, became a divisive memory. We tried to leave town, to escape the shadow that the fair had cast, but the unease followed us like a lingering curse. The couple who had tried to bring joy to the coastal community now found themselves ostracized. The fair had uncovered a dark truth, a pattern of events that linked the present to a history steeped in tragedy. The town, with its picturesque charm, harbored a darkness that refused to be erased. Alright, so I'm just a journalist, you know, trying to uncover some corruption in this quiet Midwest town. Nothing fancy, just digging for the truth. But what I stumbled upon, it was way more than I bargained for. The town seemed normal at first, with its quaint streets and friendly folks. But as I started peeling back the layers, I could sense something off. So, I focused on the sheriff's department, thinking that's where the trail might lead. Turns out, the deputy sheriff, this guy with a seemingly squeaky clean image, was up to some dark stuff. A string of violent cover-ups, mysterious disappearances, and hush-hush dealings that went beyond the usual small-town corruption. I started connecting the dots, interviewing locals, going through old records, all that investigative journalist stuff. People were scared to talk, like they were living in fear of something. It was like the whole town was holding its breath, afraid of what might happen if they spoke up. One night, as I was digging through some old case files at the sheriff's office, I found evidence of a cover-up involving the deputy sheriff. A brutal assault, swept under the rug to protect someone powerful. The more I uncovered, the more dangerous it became. I decided to confront the deputy sheriff, thinking he could be the key to cracking the whole corruption ring. But when I approached him, he didn't deny it. Instead, he smirked, like he enjoyed the power he held over the town. It sent chills down my spine, making me realize I had stepped into something way bigger than myself. As I delved deeper, threats started coming my way. Anonymous calls, ominous messages left on my doorstep. They knew I was onto them. It felt like I was being watched, every move scrutinized. The more I exposed, the more the shadows closed in around me. One night, as I was leaving the office, I heard footsteps behind me. I quickened my pace, heart pounding. The town, once familiar and welcoming, now felt like a maze of danger. I took a shortcut through a dimly lit alley, and that's when they cornered me. A group of shadowy figures emerged from the darkness, faces obscured. They warned me to back off, that I was poking into places I shouldn't. But I couldn't let it go. The corruption, the violence, it was eating away at the heart of the town, and someone had to expose it. The threats escalated. My car tires slashed, strange figures lurking outside my apartment. It was like a twisted game of cat and mouse. The deputy sheriff, the one I thought was the law, was now the very threat I needed protection from. I reached out to a fellow journalist for help, someone I trusted. We decided to expose the corruption together, thinking strength in numbers would keep us safe. But the more we dug, the more we realized the corruption had seeped into every corner of the town, and the deputy sheriff had eyes and ears everywhere. One night, as we were preparing to publish our findings, my colleague disappeared. No trace, no warning. It was like they had been erased from existence. Fear clutched at my chest, realizing I was next on the list. I received a package, a chilling message. It contained evidence of my every move, my deepest secrets. The deputy sheriff knew me better than I knew myself. The message was clear: back off or suffer the consequences. But I couldn't let fear dictate my actions. I published the expose, laid bare the corruption, and put my own safety on the line. The town erupted in chaos, protests filling the streets, demanding justice. The deputy sheriff, now exposed, lashed out. I became the target, the scapegoat for unraveling the web of lies. Every step I took felt like walking on a tightrope, with danger lurking in every shadow. I had to leave the town, abandon the life I knew, to escape the retribution that awaited me. The Midwest town, once my beat for uncovering stories, now felt like a cage from which I needed to break free. The corruption, the violence, it stained the very fabric of the place. So, I'm just a librarian in this quiet Rocky Mountain town, nothing too exciting. The library, a quaint old building with creaky floors, has been my haven for years. One day, while reorganizing the shelves, I stumbled upon a section I'd never noticed before. It was hidden behind a dusty curtain, like the town itself had decided to keep this part a secret. These books were ancient, with cracked leather covers and yellow pages. The titles hinted at forbidden knowledge, the kind you'd expect to find in some dark corner of a forgotten library. It felt wrong, but curiosity got the better of me. I started flipping through them, and that's when things took a turn. The books seemed to predict the town's future, eerie, right? It was as if someone from the past, who lived here over a century ago, had penned down the unfolding darkness. The author, a local from back then, had this uncanny ability to foresee events that matched the town's trajectory. The more I read, the more it felt like a curse. The predictions weren't pleasant either. Dark secrets, scandals, and tragedies that mirrored our reality. It was like the town had been stuck in a loop of despair, and I was privy to a script written ages ago. As the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that the books held a malevolent power. The library, once my sanctuary, felt like it had us watching my every move. Paranoia set in. I started seeing shadows, hearing whispers that echoed through the silent aisles. Then came the strange occurrences around town, events that played out exactly as described in those forbidden books. It was like the author from the past had left a cursed legacy that the town couldn't escape. The future, laid out in those pages, was unfolding before my eyes. I tried talking to the locals about it, but they dismissed it as nonsense. The town, proud of its history, refused to acknowledge the possibility that someone from its past could have foreseen its darkest moments. The more I pushed, the more I became an outsider, an intruder into the town's carefully constructed denial. The books, like forbidden relics, seemed to call out to me. Each time I entered that hidden section, the air grew heavier, and the temperature dropped. It was as if the spirits of the past were lingering, urging me to uncover the truth and break the curse that bound the town. I became obsessed, digging into historical records, trying to trace the steps of the author from over a century ago. The town's archives revealed the existence of a mysterious figure, a recluse who had lived on the outskirts and had been shunned by the community. It was him, the one who had penned down the town's grim fate. One night, as I delved deeper into the forbidden section, I found a letter hidden among the books. It was a confession of guilt and remorse, written by the long-dead author. He spoke of a pact with some unseen force, a bargain that allowed him to see the future in exchange for eternal suffering. The letter hinted at a way to break the curse, to sever the connection between the town's dark fate and those forbidden books. The author, burdened by guilt, had left behind a guide to free the town from the shackles of his predictions. I gathered a few brave souls from the town, those who were willing to confront the darkness that had gripped our home. Together, we followed the instructions laid out in the letter, a ritual to break the curse and release the town from the clutches of its twisted destiny. As we performed the ritual, the air crackled with energy. Shadows danced around us, and the temperature plummeted. It felt like we were battling unseen forces, wrestling with the lingering spirits of the past. The town's fate hung in the balance, and our actions would determine whether we could rewrite its dark future. The climax of the ritual brought a surge of power, a moment where the town's history and the present collided. It was as if time itself had been rewound, and for a brief moment, we glimpsed an alternate reality where the town was free from the grip of those cursed books. The ritual ended, leaving us breathless and uncertain. The forbidden section in the library seemed different now, the air lighter, the shadows less menacing. The curse, it seemed, had been broken, and the town was no longer bound by the predictions of its troubled past. As we stepped out into the cool Rocky Mountain night, there was a strange calm. The town, once haunted by the echoes of its dark history, felt reborn. The books, now just dusty tomes on a forgotten shelf, no longer held the power to dictate the future. Life in the Rocky Mountain town resumed, but the memory of those forbidden books lingered. The library, now free from its hidden curse, became a place of solace once again. The people, still unaware of the dark chapter we had just closed, went about their lives with a newfound sense of hope. So, there I was, just a regular firefighter in this small southwest town, doing my job. But things got weird real quick, and I found myself in the middle of something I never signed up for. It all started with a string of fires, one after the other. At first, we thought it was just bad luck, accidents maybe. But as the flames kept devouring buildings, a pattern emerged. Too many fires in too short a time span for comfort. As the town's firefighters, we were stretched thin, trying to contain the blazes. The whole community was on edge, wondering when the next fire would break out. People were losing their homes, their businesses. It was heartbreaking. But what struck me was the odd locations of the fires, almost like someone had a twisted plan. I started looking into it, asking questions around town, and that's when I felt the tension. People clammed up, avoided eye contact. It was like they were hiding something, scared to talk. But I was determined. I had to find out who or what was behind the fires. One night, after another round of battling flames, I overheard a conversation at the local diner. Some shady characters, talking in hushed tones about the fires, about how it was all part of some grand plan. My curiosity went into overdrive, and I decided to dig deeper. I snooped around, gathering bits and pieces. It seemed there was a conspiracy at play, a group orchestrating the fires for some sinister purpose. The more I uncovered, the more danger I realized the town was in. It wasn't just about structures burning down, it was about the very fabric of the community being threatened. I brought my findings to the chief, thinking he'd have my back. But he brushed it off, said I was reading too much into things. That didn't sit right with me. It felt like someone within the department was involved, pulling strings to keep the truth hidden. I decided to go rogue, investigate on my own. The fires continued, each one escalating in scale. It was like the town was descending into chaos, and I was the only one who saw the bigger picture. Late one night, I caught wind of a secret meeting in an abandoned warehouse. I slinked in, keeping to the shadows. What I witnessed, it chilled me to the bone. The conspirators, faces masked, discussing the next target, the next fire to ignite. It was like a well-organized operation, and I was the only one onto them. I recorded the meeting on my phone, thinking I had the evidence to blow the whole thing wide open. But as I left the warehouse, I felt eyes on me. Footsteps echoing in the darkness. I quickened my pace, heart pounding. It was like a game of cat and mouse, and I was the mouse. The next day, I handed the evidence to a local journalist, someone I trusted to expose the truth. But before the story could break, my world turned upside down. My house went up in flames, the very flames I had fought against. It was a message, a warning to back off. I barely escaped with my life, coughing up smoke as the fire consumed everything I owned. The town, once my home, now felt like a hostile territory. The conspiracy, the fires, it was like a cancer eating away at the place I swore to protect. I went into hiding, fearing for my life. The journalist, they went silent too, probably scared off by the same threats. The town, unaware of the conspiracy brewing within its borders, continued to burn. It was like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. As I laid low, I received a message, a chilling warning that my investigations had consequences. The conspirators were closing in, and I was a loose end that needed tying. I couldn't trust anyone, not even my fellow firefighters. The very people I had worked beside were potentially involved in this twisted plot. The town descended further into chaos. The fires raged on, consuming everything in their path. It felt like the very community I had sworn to protect was turning against me. Paranoia gnawed at me every waking moment. I had to leave, escape the town that had become a powder keg of conspiracy and danger. The southwest town, once a haven, now felt like a trap. The fires, the corruption, they were inextricably linked, threatening to consume everything in their path. So, there we were, a regular family, moving to this quiet Appalachian town. Thought it'd be a fresh start, you know? But from the get-go, something felt off, and it all revolved around the real estate agent, this guy named Mr. Anderson. We found this quaint little house on the outskirts. Seemed perfect, charming even. Mr. Anderson showed us around, all smiles, but there was something about the way he looked at us, like he was hiding a secret. And he kept pushing the sale, like he needed us to take the place, no matter what. We ignored the gut feeling, signed the papers, and moved in. But that's when things got weird. Stuff started happening around the house, doors creaking open, strange noises in the dead of night. Thought it was just an old house settling in, you know? But it wasn't just that. One day, we found a hidden door in the basement, something Mr. Anderson conveniently forgot to mention. Behind it was this creepy room, full of old dolls and faded photos. It felt like stepping into someone's dark past, and we couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this house than met the eye. We confronted Mr. Anderson, demanded an explanation. But he just smiled that unsettling smile, shrugged it off like it was no big deal. Said the room was just a storage space the previous owners used. Yeah, right. We weren't buying it, but what could we do? As weeks went by, the atmosphere in the house became suffocating. We'd hear footsteps when no one was around, and sometimes the dolls from that hidden room would end up in different places. It was like the house had a life of its own. One night, we woke up to the sound of whispering. Clear as day, like someone was right there in the room with us. But when we investigated, nothing. Just that unsettling feeling of being watched. The neighbors, too, acted strange. Gave us these wary glances, like they knew something we didn't. It felt like the whole town was in on some secret, and we were outsiders stumbling into a web of deception. One evening, as we were leaving the house, we saw Mr. Anderson lurking in the shadows. He didn't say anything, just stared at us with those cold eyes. It sent shivers down our spines. That's when we knew he wasn't just a real estate agent, he was part of whatever dark secret this town was hiding. Desperate for answers, we started digging into the town's history. Turned out, it had a sordid past, disappearances, strange rituals, the works. The house, it seemed, had a history too, tied to some old legend about a family that vanished without a trace. But every time we tried to talk to the locals about it, they clammed up, exchanged hushed words, and avoided eye contact. It was like they were afraid of something they weren't willing to share. Then, one day, we found an old diary hidden in the attic, belonging to a woman who lived in the house decades ago. Her entries spoke of strange occurrences, a feeling of malevolent presence that seemed to feed off the fear. It sent chills down our spines. It was like history repeating itself. As we unraveled the mystery, the house seemed to turn against us. Shadows flickered in the corners. The air became thick with an oppressive force. We couldn't escape the feeling that the house itself was alive, harboring a malevolence that sought to consume us. Late one night, we heard footsteps in the attic. Slow, deliberate. We mustered the courage to investigate, only to find the dolls from that hidden room arranged in a circle. It felt like some dark ritual was being enacted, and we were the unwitting participants. The final straw came when we found a locked room in the basement, a room Mr. Anderson never mentioned. Behind it, we discovered a series of tunnels leading to the town's outskirts. It was like a secret network hidden beneath the surface, and it sent a chill down our spines. Convinced that something sinister was at play, we decided to leave. But the owls, it resisted. Doors slammed shut, windows rattled. It was like the very walls were trying to keep us trapped. As we drove away from the Appalachian town, the owls shrinking in the rearview mirror, we couldn't shake the feeling that we had narrowly escaped something malevolent. Alright, so I had this clunky car, making weird noises and all. Figured I'd take it to this mechanic in a small Midwest town. People said he was good, knew his stuff. Seemed legit at first. The place was filled with the usual grease and tools. I explained the car trouble, and the guy, let's call him Joe, took a look. He mumbled something about the engine and said he'd fix it up. No big deal, right? So, I leave the car with him, thinking it'll be good as new in a day or two. Days pass, and I finally get a call saying my car's ready. Head over to Joe's garage, expecting a smooth ride home. But as soon as I hit the road, the car's acting up worse than before. It's like he made it worse, I pull over, frustrated as hell, thinking I got scammed. So, I march back to Joe's garage, ready to give him a piece of my mind. The guy seemed surprised to see me, like he didn't expect a follow-up. I lay it out, tell him my car's worse now. He stammers, saying it's just a hiccup, a minor thing. But I'm not buying it. I tell him, you better fix it, and I'm not paying extra. He agrees, reluctantly. It's a hassle, but what choice do I have? He takes the car back in, and I'm stuck in his dingy waiting area. Time ticks on, and I start getting this weird feeling. Like eyes are on me. I look around, and Joe's just watching me from his office. It's unnerving, but I brush it off, thinking maybe I'm being paranoid. Eventually, he tells me the car's good to go. Skeptical, I hop in, praying it won't break down again. As I drive away, everything seems fine at first. But as I hit the highway, the car starts acting up again. I'm furious, thinking Joe did something to mess with me. I pull over once more, and this time, I'm done. I decide to confront him, get my money back or something. I storm back into the garage, ready to unleash my frustration. Joe looks surprised again, like he didn't expect me back so soon. I lay it out, telling him this is unacceptable. He acts innocent, swearing he did a thorough job. But I'm not having it. That's when things take a creepy turn. He gets this sinister grin, like he enjoys my frustration. I get this chill down my spine, realizing there's something off about this guy. I demand my money back, threaten to report him to the authorities. But instead of apologizing or getting defensive, he just laughs. It's this unsettling, creepy laugh that sends shivers down my spine. It's like he's getting a sick pleasure from my misery. I decide to leave, but as I turn to go, he says something that stops me dead in my tracks. He whispers, "You can't leave. You're stuck here." His eyes lock onto mine, and it's like he's trying to hypnotize me or something. I bolt out of there, heart racing. I can't shake off the feeling that I just had a run-in with someone dangerous. As I drive away, I glance back, and Joe's still watching me from the garage, that creepy grin etched on his face. The car keeps acting up, and I can't shake the paranoia that Joe did something more than just mess with my engine. Maybe I stumbled into some messed up scheme he's got going on. I make it home, but the unease lingers. Days later, I take the car to another mechanic, someone reputable this time. Turns out, Joe messed with the wiring, made things worse on purpose. It's like he wanted me to keep coming back, to feed into his sick game. I report him to the authorities. I don't know what happened after that. So, we were this couple, super excited about getting hitched, you know? Decided to go all out and hired this wedding planner in the Rockies. Seemed like a dream come true at first, picturesque landscapes, crisp mountain air, the whole deal. Met the wedding planner, let's call her Jane, and she seemed professional enough. Showed us photos of these amazing weddings she organized, all smiles and promises. We signed the contract, thinking everything was set for our perfect day. As the wedding date approached, things started getting weird. Jane insisted on specific details for the ceremony, odd rituals she claimed were local traditions. We're from the city, so we thought, okay, maybe this is how they do things in the mountains. The first red flag was when she asked for a weird assortment of items, candles, stones, and some herbs I couldn't even pronounce. We're not superstitious, but it felt off, you know? We handed over the stuff, thinking it was just part of the mountain vibe. Then, she chose this remote spot in the Rockies for the ceremony. It was beautiful, but there was this eerie silence in the air, like the mountains were holding their breath. I felt uneasy, but my partner brushed it off, said it was just nerves. As the day arrived, we noticed Jane acting stranger. She whispered to herself, eyes darting around like she was seeing things we couldn't. She even insisted on specific vows, ones that sounded ancient and ominous. We were starting to regret our decision, but what could we do at that point? The ceremony kicks off, and everything feels surreal. The air gets colder, and those mountains, they seem to close in on us. Jane starts chanting these strange words, words that didn't belong to any language we knew. It felt like we were part of some ritual we never signed up for. Then, she lights the candles and places them in a pattern, muttering things under her breath. The wind picks up, but not a normal breeze, more like a whisper carrying ancient secrets. I glance at my partner, and they look as unsettled as I feel. As we exchange vows, the atmosphere gets heavier. It's like the very ground beneath us is holding its breath. Jane's chanting reaches a fever pitch, and the candles flicker violently. We start to panic, realizing this is way beyond the quirky traditions we expected. Suddenly, Jane raises her hands, and the wind howls. The shadows dance, and it feels like the mountains themselves are alive with some ancient force. It's no longer a wedding, it's a nightmare unfolding before our eyes. We try to interrupt, to stop the ritual, but Jane's eyes lock onto us, and it's like we're trapped in a gaze that sees through our souls. The ceremony spirals into chaos, the candles flare up, and strange symbols appear on the ground, symbols we never saw before. As Jane continues her chanting, we feel a presence, something unseen but undeniably there. It's like the very fabric of reality is warping around us. Panic sets in, and we realize we're way out of our depth. Just when we think it can't get worse, a fog rolls in, thick and suffocating. We can barely see each other, let alone Jane. It's disorienting, and fear claws at us. The chanting reaches a crescendo, and we're convinced we're caught in some ancient curse, far away from help. Then, as abruptly as it began, it stops. The fog lifts, and the mountains return to a serene stillness. Jane stands there, almost normal again, like she didn't just plunge us into a nightmarish ritual. The candles flicker out, and it's over. We stumble away from that godforsaken spot, shaking to our cores. The celebration we envisioned turned into a surreal nightmare. We confront Jane, demanding answers, but she plays innocent, like she doesn't remember a thing. We decide to cut ties, leave that cursed place behind. But the echoes of that eerie ceremony haunt us. The Rockies, once a symbol of majestic beauty, now feel like a silent witness to something dark and ancient. Our wedding day, meant to be a celebration of love, becomes a tale we share in hushed tones, a cautionary reminder of the unseen forces that can lurk beneath even the most idyllic settings.